What is up, everybody? Kyle here again, and today I'm doing something different. This isn't a weekly purchases, this isn't an unboxing video. This is my top 10 playsets, bases, whatever you want to call them, of all time. Obviously these skew from when I was a kid, when I played, and I actually had every single one of these at one time or another in my life. And these are my top 10 playsets of all time. Alright, starting with number 10, something that was a childhood memory for me, one of the first toy lines I collected, and that was He-Man. And you're probably thinking Castle Grayskull, but nope, throwing a curve in here. Number 10 is Snake Mountain. I absolutely love Snake Mountain as a kid. I've always loved the bad guys, the dark, menacing. You know, I've loved that playset. The purple just always popped on it. The head of the snake that turned. The little microphone you could talk into. The bridge, the ladder. I love the wolf face on that gate that opened. It was just an all-time cool playset. Castle Grayskull was great, but to have Skeletor's lair and all that, it was just another level to me. I remember just thinking how awesome it was as a kid. And then you look at the box art for it. The box art for He-Man figures were just something else. Just cool, creepy, atmospheric. I absolutely love Snake Mountain and had a lot of time as a kid playing with it. You know, in newer Snake Mountain news, Super 7 has been threatening to release. They had a big backing, a pre-order, and it was all filled. It's coming out sometime this year, I believe, but an updated, huge Snake Mountain. As you can see from the pictures, just a sweet, sweet play set. I'm not getting the He-Man figures as of right now, so I passed on it. Probably going to be a huge regret down the line, but I think it was something like $500. Off topic a little bit, I would love to see an aircraft carrier very similar. Let's fund that thing. I'll get a new aircraft carrier in a heartbeat. But Snake Mountain would be number 10 for me. All right, we get into number 9. And number 9 is one probably a lot of people didn't have. I know none of my friends had this one, but it was Mask Boulder Hill playset. If everybody remembers the Mask figures, it was like kind of a mix between G.I. Joe and Transformers. It had a little guy even smaller than G.I. Joe, and then they came with vehicles. Well, Boulder Hill was their base. It was a big mountain-type looking thing with a ball that could roll off. I used that a lot, but it was like a gas station that transformed into their base. A really cool playset. I actually used this as a kid playing. I would put this as part of my G.I. Joe playsets, as part of my G.I. Joe world. They would stop at the gas station and they would go into it. And then you've seen lately, not lately, but Mask universe has been molded into the G.I. Joe universe. The G.I. Joe 25th anniversary collection had Matt Tracker officially join the G.I. Joe team, and that was the leader of the Mask team. But Boulder Hill, like I said, a lot of my friends didn't have this. I played with this religiously for a long, long time. It came with a cool little jail. You could put Venom characters in. That would be Masked Enemy as Venom. But I would use that for Star Wars, G.I. Joe, wrestling as a shark cage. That little jail was awesome and was used many different times as a kid when I was collecting and playing as a kid. But a very, very cool, very, very underrated set that you don't hear a whole lot about these days. But that's number 9 for me, the Mask playset, Boulder Hill. Moving on to number 8, a vehicle, base, all-in-one, but probably one of the most iconic items on this list, one that probably the most majority of people had one time in their life, be it the original issue or the late 90s reissue, or even from then on, some more reissues. And I'm talking about Star Wars, the Millennium Falcon. Nothing reeks of Star Wars more than Han Solo's ship with Chewbacca in there. Just hours and hours of playtime with the Millennium Falcon as a kid. I always loved that little chess. It wasn't chess. I forget what they call it in Star Wars, but it looked like a chess checkerboard that was included in there. The pivoting guns and the sounds and the cockpit you could put guys into. I mean, it was really basic bare bones back in the 80s, late 70s, I think it first came out, but in the 80s. I would love to see an updated huge one day in the Black Series. I mean, we're looking at probably a $400 price point, but it would be really cool for nostalgic purposes, and I would love to have one that's more, complete. You can move around a little bit more and stuff, where you had the top clip that went over to cover the top, which was cool, and you could take that out and have a little play area for your figures. But it's a very iconic one. I think probably not many more Star Wars vehicles at garage sales back in the late 80s and 90s than the Millennium Falcon. You'd see this thing everywhere. Over time it does yellow. I've noticed there's a lot of yellowed ones over time, which happens to a lot of stormtroopers just with the plastic fading. But not many cooler vehicles, play sets out there, and it was a must-have if you were a serious Star Wars collection and collector. I mean, it's kind of like not having Han Solo or Luke or Darth Vader in your set. You had to have the staples, and if you're going to have one Star Wars vehicle, I would say it was probably the Falcon. So there we go. That's the next one off our list, the Millennium Falcon. As we jump into number 7, we're going to start it right off with the Ghostbusters Firehouse. I absolutely loved the Firehouse as a kid. Probably one of the best big play sets that ever was used. And I used this thing with G.I. Joe. I used this with superheroes. I used it with Star Wars even. There was a lot of fun times that I spent with that Ghostbuster Firehouse. I love that you could bring the Ecto-1 and park that inside the firehouse and have it come out through the gates. It had the container for all the ghosts you could use and pretend with. Just so many uses, and such a fun toy. We're seeing the Walmart exclusive new Ghostbuster toys coming out right now. I am very, very hopeful that they will reissue this Firehouse playset. It's kind of doubtful, as I don't think big vehicles really sell, big playsets sell like they used to. With shelf space, it's such a premium now. If Toys R Us was still around, there's a possibility that would be on the shelf, but it's a pipe dream. But boy, I would love it. I would love to own that Firehouse again. It used to come with the plasma cans, and you could buy extra plasma and dump through the top that would go through. That plasma has come a long way. My kids love slime, probably like a lot of your kids or kids out there. They love playing with slime and all that stuff. It's come a long ways, because I remember that ectoplasm you'd buy, it would stick and get stuck in there and crust off and be really hard. You'd be working to clean that out all the time of your Firehouse. But just a very cool playset. I love the height of it. Most vehicles and playsets were longer or bigger. This was just a straight up Firehouse. Really unlike anything else at the time. So very, very happy as a kid when I had this Firehouse. One of my big selling regrets that I sold that way back when, but who knows? That and the Ecto-1 may return to our collections sooner than later. All right, moving along to number 6. And this is probably the sleeper of the set. This or the mask one. Probably nobody figured would be on this list. But it's the Toy Biz Marvel Daily Bugle Spiderman playset from the early to mid-90s. This is right at the end of my playing days, but it was a cool display piece. It was a city, like a skyscraper, with a city walkway with a nice table card that fit on the bottom where it looked like cement of a New York City street. It had little things you could do, a crane that lifted up the garbage and stuff like that. Very, very cool. Very awesome base of operations for your toys when you're playing, meeting in the city, fighting the Vulture with your Spider-Man. I also used this for G.I. Joes. It was part of a cityscape for G.I. Joes, along with Boulder Hill and the Firehouse, making a huger world out there. And this was the downtown scene of my world for many of figures. I also loved it came with the big dumpster. And I remember back in the day when I was a kid, the Jack's Bone Crunchers came out. I used that dumpster in matches. After the Mick Foley, Terry Funk dumpster match, I would use that in between as my dumpster for dumpster matches. So a lot of cool accessories, a lot of things to do, a lot of activities to base your battles and your worlds around. And then even better, you could use this city scene with different fig lines throughout the days. So there it is, number 6, a bit of a sleeper that a lot probably didn't expect, and a lot of you guys maybe didn't have out there, but a very, very cool one at the end of the day. All right, number 5. Now, if you were thinking in your head of a top 10 list for a kid from the 80s, I'm sure you have some ideas of what possibly could be on this list. And I would bet 9 out of 10 of you would guess this one right. And at number 5, He-Man Castle Grayskull. We talked about Snake Mountain at number 10. He-Man Castle Grayskull was a next level thing you had to have for your He-Man collection, for sure. The outside, just menacing, awesome, that dark green color. It was very, very cool to me. I loved the exterior of it. I love the artwork on the package, very dark and menacing. The only downside on this one I would give it is the inside. Nothing really too exciting. Some weapons, a chair, a couple of blasters, a flag. There was that cool little sticker on the bottom that looked like a dungeon that I liked. You can actually buy rugs that look like that for your house, which I wouldn't mind having one of those. But a very cool playset. The inside is a little to be desired. I also forgot to mention there was an elevator inside of there. But when you folded it up and put it out there, very menacing. Total regret. Wish I could get one. I've been tempted to buy one just to have as a display piece put together. I might even buy one without the insides. They're fairly cheap, very common. This was a must-have for kids. I talked about the Millennium Falcon. You can't play He-Man without Castle Grayskull. You could probably get away without Snake Mountain, but you had to have Castle Grayskull. It was so important to He-Man, and still is to this day in lore. But that would be number 5, Castle Grayskull from He-Man. All right, moving along, we're at number 4 now. And we're talking Star Wars once again, and this is a big-time sleeper one. It's not necessarily a vehicle, not necessarily a play set, a little bit all in one. It's more of a monster, and I'm talking about the Rancor Monster. From Return of the Jedi, Jabba's Palace, one of my all-time favorite scenes of Star Wars. I love playing with that Rancor as a kid, and it also doubled as a monster. With Cobra Law, I used it as a Cobra Law monster with my G.I. Joes. I used it in Ghostbusters with my Kenner Ghostbuster toys as a thing they fought. I even used it with He-Man as a monster they fought. It was very versatile for a kid with a good imagination. It still holds up to this day. I would love to have another one. It's just a really hard plastic. You do see them chipped out there these days, but it was so cool with the mouth that opened, and you could pretend to have guys getting eaten. The Rancor was one of the best vehicle, monster, play sets, whatever you want to call them, of the 80s in my book. I did actually buy a few years back when Toys R Us was going out of business, the Black Series, more up-to-date Rancor, and that sits in my collection right now. But I would like to get this old school one just for nostalgia purposes back in my collection. But that is the Rancor Monster, a total awesome favorite of mine. All right, moving in, getting to the final 3 here. We're going to go number 3. Some of you guys might think this would be number 1 for me, but it isn't. It's number 3, but is a total must-have, just like I've discussed in some of the other ones. It is the Hasbro WWF Ring. Be it the original blue one with the circle post, or the square one with the flag, or the later model King of the Ring yellow ring. You had to have at least one ring in your collection if you were a serious WWF fan as a kid. You could play on the floor and stuff. I know a lot of kids did that, but when you got that ring, it brought things to the next level. Your wrestling fig fed was totally serious with that ring. I actually had 2 of the blue rings that I put together. I was a big WCW kid. I loved the War Games matches and the Battle Bowls and stuff like that when they used the 2 rings. Had a lot of hours of fun. I mean, hundreds of hours we're talking with this Hasbro rings as a kid playing with them. Not a ton of bells and whistles. It didn't need catapults. It didn't need anything. You had a table on the outside that held the belt. You had the flag with the later releases, the nice WWF sticker in there, and it was a ring. You let your imagination do the work for you. A lot of these other play sets had bells, whistles, things they did. This was more of an accessory where you could, design your fig fed and have your matches and all that. It was great, and it really helped you with your imagination for sure. But the hours that were spent on this, and I even go back to the LJN ring, very similar. Had to have that LGN ring, and it made things serious. It made you you were really in the game with your wrestling figures when you had the ring. That just brought it all together. So that's number 3, the Hasbro WWF Ring. All right, getting there. Number 2, my favorite line of all time, G.I. Joe. And you're probably thinking there's a lot of ways this could go, but I'm maybe putting a sleeper out there. Maybe you guys didn't know about this one. It was more probably 89, 90. Don't quote me on that, but very end of the 80s, G.I. Joe. But it was the Defiant Space Shuttle. Awesome. Massive. Huge. This is the one thing on my top 10 list here that I never technically owned. My best friend would leave for the summer to his family's restaurant, would help with his family restaurant, busting tables and stuff, and he was gone for the whole summer. One summer he had this, and he said, "Hey Kyle, you can borrow it for the 3 months of the summer." And oh my gosh, I played with that thing every single day amongst my G.I. Joes. I got as much use of it as I could in those 3 months. This is an expensive, over $100 price point for the Defiant Shuttle. You know, it was cool. It was getting that G.I. Joe in space, taking G.I. Joe to the next level. All kinds of playability all over this thing. You know, NASA was huge. You know, back in the 80s, as a kid, you watched a lot of NASA space launches and stuff like that as a kid. It happened all the time in school. So space was a really cool thing for kids. There was a lot of kids my age that wanted to be an astronaut. That was never me. But there was a lot of kids that wanted to be astronauts. So this was a hot seller. And just being huge and the storability and how many guys fit on it. You know, the battles you could have on top and inside. Just an all-around cool toy. Like I said, I had one buddy. He was the only one I ever knew that had this. And I was so thankful I got to borrow that for a summer. That was one of the best summers ever as a kid. That's for sure. And that is the G.I. Joe Defiant Space Shuttle at number 2. All right, like any good list, they got to end sometime, and we're finally at number 1. A lot of you people can probably imagine what number 1 is. Maybe some of you can't, but this is the greatest toy of all time. You will never be able to argue this with me. I've never spent more time with anything in my life as far as toys than this toy, and that is the USS Flagg G.I. Joe aircraft carrier. The greatest playset of all time. 7 feet long. My dad is 6'8". I used to have him as a kid. Lay next to it, Dad, because the Flagg was actually taller than my dad. It was the most amazing toy. I'll never forget the Christmas I got it. I didn't think I was very good that year. I thought Santa had forgotten about me. I wake up Christmas morning. My sister has all these toys under the tree. I have 2 G.I. Joe guys. I sat on the couch and thought, well, that's what I get for being bad this year. It's my fault. This is what you get if you're a bad kid. And my dad actually let this go on for a while. And after some time had passed, I sulked down to my basement. You know, my basement was where all my toys were. Just kind of sad. I'm going to play with my 2 new G.I. Joe guys in that. I turn on that basement light, and what do I see but the USS Flagg all put together down there. I about fainted. I could not believe what I was seeing. My ultimate dream toy, there it is, right there in front of me. And I later found out, you know, my dad spent all night trying to put that thing together. I would go to bed for Santa, let's say it was 9 o'clock. Well, I was up by 10:30 wanting to check the tree all the time. So my dad was under the gun, and that Flagg takes hours to put together. I mean, there's like 1,000 stickers on that thing. Awesome toy. Probably the greatest Christmas memory of my life. I'll never forget getting that one. And like I said, the hours upon hours I played. That was the center of my G.I. Joe universe. You know, planes could land on it. There was so much room for figures. This was a $100 toy back there in 1986, 87, which was probably like a $700-800 toy now. This thing was massive. I would love to see, we got a new G.I. Joe line coming out from Hasbro, the Classified series. I don't know if they could ever pull it off, but if they could make a scale aircraft carrier, it would probably be $1,000, but I would find a way to be a first day buyer for that. I still have, to this day, my original USS Flagg I got for Christmas back then. I do not have it together. My ultimate dream goal is one day get like a clear acrylic like case and make it a coffee table and put the Flagg inside of there. I think that would be an awesome display piece. Just never got around to it and stuff, but I'm sure I'm missing a piece or two. It's moved probably 10 times in my life, so there's always that opportunity to lose some pieces, which didn't happen to me very often, but I would love to get that Flagg together and displayed once again, and hopefully we get a new Flagg. But, you know, there was very few kids that got the Flagg back in the day, and I was one of the fortunate ones. And my friends would come over and we would play, with all the other vehicles and everything else. But it was truly the greatest toy of all time, in my opinion, and my greatest playing with toy memories of my life. So there it is. I hope you guys enjoyed a quick 1 through 10 countdown of my favorite play sets of all time. And we'll have some more of these videos. I got a few more of these kind of videos in me, but I hope you guys enjoyed. So make sure you like the video. Comment on the video, what's your top 10? I would love to hear your top 10 play sets, heavy-duty vehicles of all time, to see where our lists are the same and where they differ. So please comment on that. I would love to see it. And then, as always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. This is Kyle, and I'll see you guys all soon.